Hey friends, thanks so much for stopping by. Today I'm making 3 spring Easter Bunny gnomes using Dollar Tree supplies, and I hope you enjoy them. I'm starting my gnome by using one of the white woman's Dollar Tree crew socks, and I'm actually going to be using 2 for this project. You can fill your socks with just about anything, but I like to use bath salts. So I'm using this 17.6 ounce container from the Dollar Tree, and mine is a eucalyptus mint, and it smells really, really good. To fill it, I just slip the end of the sock over the mouth of the jar. To help hold the salt in place, I'm using an elastic band and I'm tying off the end of the sock. With that in place, I'm cutting down the top center of the sock and I'm just tying it in half. Here's where my second sock comes into play. I'm simply sliding it over my first. The reason I'm doing this is because some of the small particles of bath salts can actually filter their way out through the fabric. For my gnome's beard, I'm using one of these fluffy purple keychains that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I'm using my scissors to cut away the hanger and then the string inside that holds it all together. So once in a while you actually have to kind of trim up the pom-pom, but this one seems to have a pretty good shape, so I'm just going to attach it onto my sock. I added some hot glue onto the front of my sock, making sure not to place anywhere I'm going to be adding the nose, and then I just attached the beard. And once again, I just cut down the center of the top of the sock and I just tied it in half. For my gnome's nose, I'm using a large wooden bead that I had in my stash. It's a little over an inch, but you can always use one of the Dollar Tree table tennis balls. For the feet, I'm using one of these wooden hearts that I picked up at the Dollar Tree around Valentine's Day, but if you don't have any of these on hand, you can always use one of the Dollar Tree chalkboard tag hearts. I'm painting both of mine with some coral acrylic paint, but that's just personal preference. You can choose any color at all. With my nose dry, I'm pulling back the beard, I'm adding a dot of hot glue, and then I'm attaching the nose in place. Once that was in place, I then glued both sides of the beards around the nose. For my gnome's hat, I wanted to use an Easter sock, but my Dollar Tree never got any in. So I'm going to be using this woman's sock that I found at the Dollar Tree, and it kind of reminds me of Easter eggs. I'm making sure the heel is on the back of my sock, and then on the open end, I'm tucking it in about 4 inches or so. I'm placing it over my gnome's head, and the easiest way to do this is to really stretch out the end of the sock. I pulled it tightly over the nose and the sides and the back, and then I cuffed about 2 inches of the inside fabric that I had originally tucked inside the sock. By doing this, I'm making a little pocket for both of the ears to sit in. To keep my hat in place, I added a line of hot glue over the top of my gnome's nose. I turned my gnome around and attached the back of the hat, and then I attached both of the sides. I'm going to be tying off the end of the sock where you can see there's a little bit of a white toe section, and I'm using some of this pretty polka dot ribbon that I found at the Dollar Tree. I cut a length of the ribbon and I just wrapped it around where the white end of the sock was, and then I just tied it into a simple bow. To finish it off, I just trimmed off the ends of the ribbon. To add on the ears, I'm using some leftover pieces that I had from the Dollar Tree microfiber dusting pads. When I turn the pad around, you can see where the lines are sewn onto the back. I'm then cutting about 2 inches from the outside next to the sewn lines, and I'm making sure that I don't cut through them. I'm cutting the same size piece on the other side, and once again, I'm making sure that I don't cut through the sewn fabric. These pieces are pretty messy, and I'm just pulling off all the loose fibers. When I'm done, I'm then using my scissors and I'm rounding off the top of each. To help control the shedding, I use hairspray and I just give it a coat on both sides. When I'm done, I'm matching both tops of the ears together and then I'm cutting the bottoms off even. With both my ears complete, I'm now tucking the ends of them into the cuff that I made on the hat. I then used my glue gun, added some hot glue to the back of the hat, and attached the ears in place. I'm attaching the gnome's feet by placing some hot glue on the top of my painted heart and then placing down the gnome. To make his arms, I'm cutting a strip out of the microfiber cloth, making sure that it's long enough to wrap around his beard and onto the sides. When I was done, I cleaned off all the little fibers, and then using my glue gun, I attached an arm on one side and then the other. My gnome bunny is going to be carrying an armful of carrots, and I found these felt stickers at the Dollar Tree. I removed the little sticker from the back, and then I tucked it into my gnome's arms. I use these felt stickers, but you can have your bunny hold just about anything. This step is completely optional. I added a little blush to the end of a cotton swab, and then I just accented the bunny's ears. To add on the cottontail, I actually removed this pom-pom from the top of a Dollar Tree hat, and I'm just adding some hot glue to the back of my gnome and attaching the tail. And with that, this bunny gnome is ready to hop into spring. If you're enjoying my video, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below and leaving me a big thumbs up. To start my floppy-eared Easter Bunny gnome, I'm recycling a can of Pringles potato chips, and this isn't the large container or the small, it's the medium size, and I think it's about 14.5 ounces. To give my container a little weight, I'm using a handful of these glass beads. They sell them at the Dollar Tree, or you can use some sand or some rocks or anything that you have on hand. I placed mine in the container and then just snapped on the lid. With that done, I'm using some white acrylic paint and I'm giving the base of the container a coat. When it's dry, I'm going to be using one of these white quarter socks from the Dollar Tree. And all I'm doing is simply sliding it over the base for my bunny. To give my base a little shape, I'm using a handful of polyfill and I'm just going to kind of tuck it around the top of the can. Now that I have it in place, I'm using my glue gun and tacking down the edge of the sock onto the top base of the bunny. For my gnome's beard, I'm using this pink pom-pom that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, and I'm just removing the hanger and the thread inside that holds it together. And surprise, surprise, I found a little white pom-pom inside, so I'm going to end up using this for my bunny's tail. I'm using my scissors and I'm just cleaning up the edges of the pom-pom and giving it a bit of a rounded shape. I'm now adding some hot glue to the bottom of the base, making sure that I leave an area for the nose, and then attaching the beard into place. For the gnome's nose, you can use one of the table tennis balls from the Dollar Tree. I'm using one of these wooden beads that I had on hand, and mine measures a bit larger than 1 inch in diameter. If you're using the table tennis ball, an easy way to paint it is to just slide it onto the end of a wooden skewer. I'm painting my gnome's nose with this parchment acrylic paint, but you can choose any color that you'd like. With my gnome's nose dry, I'm adding some hot glue to the front, just under the beard, and attaching it into place. Now once again, using my glue gun, I'm attaching the sides of the beard up around the nose. I'm using one of these diabetic crew socks from the Dollar Tree, but you can choose any color that you'd like. Using my ruler, I'm cutting 4 inches up from the toe. I'm using my scissors and I'm cutting down the center of the sock to just about where it begins on the heel. I'm then tucking the raw end of the sock in about 2 inches. Now, keeping the end of the sock tucked under, I'm slipping it over my gnome's head. And while I'm doing this, I'm making sure that the cut line is centered over the nose. I'm adding some hot glue to my gnome's nose and attaching the front of the hat. I then turned my gnome around, added on some hot glue, and attached the back of the hat. I'm turning the 2 cut pieces of socks into bunny ears. I folded the 2 pieces of fabric together and then I cut them away at an angle. After I did it to my first, I followed the same instructions and did it to my second. To hide the hole in the top of my hat, I'm just tying the ears in half. I then tucked a few small pieces of polyfill under the hat to give it a little more height. When I was done, I then hot glued the 2 sides of the hat down. To hide the fold in the fabric on top of the hat, I pulled 4 flowers off of this Dollar Tree stem. I then added some hot glue to the top and popped the flowers into place. I'm using this pretty Easter egg ribbon that I found at the Dollar Tree, and I'm just making a simple bow for the front. I cut the ends at an angle, and then using my hot glue gun, I attached it to the front of the gnome. To add the arms to the bunny, I'm cutting about a 1-inch piece from the toe fabric. I'm cutting one end in the loop, and for some reason this fabric, it turns itself inside out, but it looks kind of fuzzy like a bunny, so I'm just going to tie a knot in the center. I'm using a small basket that I had on hand, and I'm adding in some of the small Dollar Tree vase fillers to make it look like Easter eggs. When I was done, to add the basket to the bunny's hands, I just simply slipped it on. Then to attach it to my gnome, I centered the basket under the nose and attached an arm on each side. For my gnome's feet, I'm using one of these wooden hearts that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, but if you can't find any of these, the chalkboard wooden tags will work just as well. I decided to paint my gnome's feet yellow, but just about any color would look great. When the feet had dried, I just added some hot glue to the top and then placed down the gnome. To finish up, I'm going to hot glue that pom-pom to the back of my gnome bunny. And with that, this gnome Easter bunny is complete. For the base of my bunny gnome, I'm using one of these children's hats that I found at the Dollar Tree. It has these cute little palms on the top, and I'm actually removing one and using the other as the bunny's tail. To help my gnome stand up, I'm tracing a small bowl onto a heavy piece of cardboard. When I was done, I then cut it out, making sure that it fit in the bottom part of the hat. Now that I have it in place, I'm going to use some recycled polyfill and stuff the hat. Using my glue gun, I'm adding some to each side and I'm kind of folding over the fabric just to make the top a bit smaller. To make the beard for my gnome, I'm using some strands from this Dollar Tree mop head. I'm going to cut off 20, but depending on the size you want your beard, you can always use a few more or a few less. Now that they're cut, I'm lying them side by side and trying to keep the ends as even as possible. Attaching them together, I'm using a white chenille stem, but any color will work just fine. I'm placing a line of hot glue down the center and then placing on the chenille stem. When I'm done, I'm then folding the left mop strands over the chenille stem and onto the right. When I'm done, this is what my beard will look like. You can use it as is if you like. I like my beard to be a bit fuller, so I'm going to open each of the mop head strands. Now that my beard is open, I'm going to trim up the sides and just kind of clean it up a bit. To add it to my gnome, I'm placing it on the front and tucking the chenille stems down inside. I'm adding some hot glue to the body and then attaching the beard. For my gnome's nose, I'm using one of the table tennis balls from the Dollar Tree. And to make it easy to paint, I'm sliding one end onto a wooden skewer. Now using my coral acrylic paint, I'm giving it a complete coat. When it's dry, I'm using my glue gun and attaching it to the gnome just above the beard. Once it's in place, I then use my glue gun and attach both sides of the beard around the nose. I'm using this pretty blue Dollar Tree hat for my gnome, and it has this little dinosaur on it. I cannot get it off, so I'm just going to turn the hat around and use the back. I want to make it a bit fuller, so I'm just going to add a handful of polyfill inside. Now that I'm done, I'm just slipping it over the gnome's head. I'm then placing a line of hot glue on the gnome's nose and attaching the hat. When I'm done, I'm then attaching the two sides and the back. To make the bunny ears, I'm using a piece of the Dollar Tree microfiber pad. I'm cutting it in the center, making sure not to cut any of the back stitching, and I'm making both sides about 2 inches wide. They're pretty messy, so I'm cleaning off as much of the fibers as I can. To give them the appearance of bunny ears, I'm using my scissors and I'm rounding off one end. To help hold down some of those flyaway fibers, I give mine a coat of hairspray on the back and the two sides. Adding the bunny ears to the gnome is super easy. I'm placing each one under the cuff of the hat. Once they're in place, I'm adding some hot glue to the hat and then under the cuff. To add a bit of highlight to my bunny's ears, I placed a bit of blush on the end of a cotton swab and then accented the center of both ears. I'm making my bunny gnome a simple bow, and I'm using this pretty Easter egg ribbon that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. When I was done, I then cut both ends at an angle. I added some hot glue in between the bunny's ears, and then I attached my bow. As an extra accent, I have this sweet little daisy, and I'm adding it onto the bow. The hat has a natural point to it, so I just squeezed the two ends in and it stayed in place. To hide the dinosaur in the back, I cut a short piece of the microfiber pad and then I just hot glued it into place. And when I was done, this large gnome bunny is ready for Easter. Thanks again for stopping by, and I hope you enjoyed making these Dollar Tree gnomes with me. If you're new to my channel and you haven't yet subscribed and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. I'll see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.